can kind of talk about wherever it needs to go. The first and most fundamentally important thing about Krispy Kreme, though, is, Helen, I hate being behind this thing, so I'm going to have to walk out here, is that we've been around a long time. And so for many of you who, give me another show of hands, how many people grew up within 100 miles a year? Pretty good number of people, okay? So you're familiar with Krispy Kreme. A lot of people don't know, though, 76 years old as a brand. Started here in Winston-Salem. As a matter of fact, probably just a couple miles from here in Old Salem. There's a plaque that's still there you can go see if you want to have that little moment. But it started here in Winston-Salem. It started with a guy down there that had a warehouse, and he started making these donuts and was selling them to bakeries. And we get that a lot where people would say, well, when did you start doing like wholesaling in grocery stores? That's actually the way the company started. It didn't start with retail locations. It started with him manufacturing donuts in an old warehouse. And you guys have all been in Krispy Kreme, so you know what they smell like, right? So, and you know, back in the 30s, let's just say that it was, everything wasn't quite as tight in a building, so you can think about the smell that kind of wafted out into the, and so people were banging on the doors wanting to buy donuts, and so he literally cut a hole in the side of the warehouse and started selling donuts. That's how it really, that's how it began. He literally started the company with about 25 bucks, as I understand it, that he had to borrow. And so that's how we started. We're 76 years old. We manufacture all of our mix, if you will, the mix to make those donuts in the United States, right here in town, down on Ivy Avenue, in a facility that's about 70 years old, still using some of the same equipment. And as a matter of fact, we have employees and team members in that facility that have been with us for 40 or 50 years making that mix. All of our equipment, so if you see all those donut making machines, is all manufactured here in town as well, just off of 40 here in this town. The other thing that you probably don't know is we're in 23 countries now. We just opened Moscow, we just opened India, we just opened Singapore this year. And so the other thing you have to think about as you think about your brand, like we think about ours, our brand has to have the same character in every one of those countries. It's the same donut, believe it or not, in every one of those countries. Much like you have to decide who you are as a person and a character, but that may change. For instance, I'm assuming you probably are dressed a little bit differently today than you'd be dressed if you were hanging out at your house watching a game or something, right? So you change and you make changes based upon who you're going to be around, as we do. We have a lot of languages and a lot of cultures. But that doesn't change the core of who we are as a brand. So I want you to keep that in mind, too, as we talk more. Probably the most important thing about our brand is what we call our mission statement. I'm sure that you guys have kind of, in some of your management classes, talked about mission statements and those kind of things. I'm probably going to step on some toes here because people have different opinions as to what a mission statement should be and what it shouldn't be. So I will apologize up front to my academic friends who are in the room if I say something that's different. The practical side for Krispy Kreme, I'll say that, is that our mission statement really doesn't have, as you can see, anything to do with our sales. It doesn't have anything to do with our transactions. We're a public company, but it doesn't have anything to do with shareholders or making profit. Our mission statement, or our purpose, to touch and enhance lives through the joy that's Krispy Kreme, we believe if we do that well, then what happens is the results we look for, which are sales and transactions and profit, those are the results of having the right mission and the right objectives. And so we're going to talk about that. Relating it back to yourself, if your mission, your purpose is about making money, probably going to have some really tough times in your life if that's really the only thing about it. Now, you can probably go and make some money. You can probably go do that. But in the end, we would feel from a Krispy Kreme standpoint, we get to the end of that and feel that that was very shallow. The other thing, too, is if that was my only objective here, I could go drive some incredible sales, but think what I might do to the brand in the meantime. I might decimate my brand trying to accomplish those. So those really aren't the mission and the objective. The other thing I would tell you is for Krispy Kreme, it's not a bunch of words. My senior management and I, we meet every week to talk about the business and where we're going, and we talk about this every week. Every week, because you'll find, too, as you're making decisions, and you probably have these in your own lives, most of those decisions really aren't as black and white as you'd like them to be, right? You'd like those. Should I go here or should I go here? Should I take this class or this class? Should I go to this career or this career? But really, there's a lot of gray area that you have to interpret. And for us, when those gray areas happen, we look at this and say, okay, well, what would our mission, our purpose say that we do? And it actually becomes pretty clear. Again, as an individual, if you have this for yourself, it's going to help you a lot in making the decisions that you have to make. I hope that you can kind of start seeing that would help me a lot in making those decisions for me. Having said that, the other important thing to know is that we're not about selling donuts. Our CEO says this all the time when people talk about the business. I have a lot of investors that I end up having to talk to at investor conferences, and they'll say things like, well, how long do you think donuts can be relevant? How long are you going to be able to have your business and not expand that menu and be able to have other things and some breakfast sandwiches and those things? And I always tell them the same thing. You know what? You assume for a second that I'm in the donut business, which I am not. The business that I am in, we have found out through our guests and doing research, is not really about donuts at all, which is kind of hard to believe. Now, donuts is a big part of it. And they got to be great donuts, and they got to be hot donuts, and we hear all the stories about people driving across traffic when the hot light comes on, and all those kind of things you experience, right? And that feeling, you know, I mean, you guys can relate. You have that, remember that first hot donut, and that feeling of almost chills as you ate it, right? Particularly on a cold day. So it's a lot about the donut, but ultimately in the end, what we found out is that it really is about joy. It's an emotional thing. 100% of our business is purely, completely emotional. And what we hear, I'll give you an example, and you guys can probably relate to this. So we did a focus group a couple years ago, and there was this young lady, and I'll never forget, we said, so tell us why do you come to Krispy Kreme? Give us some occasions where you come to Krispy Kreme. And she said, well, you know what, I'll come, like for instance, when I need to get a new boyfriend to celebrate. And then she talked a little bit more, and then she said, well, and then I'll probably go back when he breaks up with me. So you can kind of get the emotional side of that it can be for celebrating a really good day, or I've had a really crappy day, or a crappy week, and I need to have a donut to make myself feel a little better. So when we step back and realize that it's not about donuts, and we step back and realize that it's about emotions, the other thing we can always hear is, like for instance, and you probably relate to this, anytime you've ever gone and bought donuts, you probably thought it was for somebody else, or you made that excuse, like, well, it's Angie's birthday, or people will say, I'm going to get them for Bob at the office. But the same thing happens every time. Someone drives through the drive-thru, they get the donuts, they set them on the seat, and what's the first thing you do? Right? You reach in there and get a donut for yourself. I mean, it's completely selfish, the whole deal. We don't talk about that to our guests because we don't want them to feel bad. We want them to feel guilty. But it really is very much about the emotion side of this. And so again, for us, when I'm talking to those investors, and they say, how long can your brand stay relevant selling donuts? And I say, well, you assume for a second that we're in the donut business. If we're in the emotion business, and more specifically in the joy business, I can't imagine any time that I can think of in this world, in any culture or any language, that they're not going to need more joy. Think about any country you can imagine, and you'd think that that culture wouldn't want a little happiness in their lives or a little more joy. And so if we stop and step back and go a little more macro and think about what it's really about, then it's really not about donuts. It's about this piece. And so for us too, the other thing I would tell you is, and this is going to sound a little sentimental, but ultimately I'm going to give you an example. So there was a guy in one of our focus groups, and the conversation went something like this. We'd say, well, why do you go to Krispy Kreme? And he would say, well, you know what, it's really good, the place is nice, we really like the donuts, the kids like the donuts, and they start talking about those kind of things. But then when you go deeper, and you say, well, you like to bring your kids. So tell me about like to bring your kids. Why do you like to bring your kids? Well, you know what, a lot of times I'm traveling, and I kind of start feeling a little bit guilty because maybe I haven't been there all week, and I want to just spend a little time. And we said, okay, well, talk about that. What kind of value then do you get out of spending time with your kids? Literally what it gets down to is this. The guy looks at us and says, you know what, I never thought about it this way before, but when I go to Krispy Kreme with my kids, I feel like a better dad. So from a marketing standpoint, man, I'm going to market to feel like a better dad all day long, right? Because if it's just about donuts, somebody else can make a donut. Somebody else can make a hot donut. We would argue that they could make one as good as Krispy Kreme, but they could try, right? But ultimately, in the end, they can't get to that. Relating it back to you for a second. Can anybody get a degree? Well, at some level, you know, they can get a degree. Can they get a degree in business or marketing? Well, yeah. Can they have a little bit of experience? Yeah. I mean, think about those things that you think differentiate you, and in the end, they really don't. You have to step back and say, what am I really about? What do I really have to offer this organization or this company that is fundamentally different than anything everybody else can offer? And so for us, from a Krispy Kreme standpoint, that's kind of where we've lived. The exciting thing, too, is for us, it allows you to simplify things. I'm going to talk about that here in a little bit as well. It allows you to cut out a lot of things out of your life or your company that don't have nearly as much meaning that you're kind of spinning your tires with. It also leads us to this. From a marketing standpoint, I have one objective and only one objective. My marketing objective is to have these really meaningful, long-term, kind of positive relationships with people. We do that by making emotional connections. We start with our team members, and then our guests, and then the communities. Think about the team member thing standpoint. How many times have you gone in, let's say, a restaurant, and let's say the service was kind of crappy, right? Things aren't going really well. Next time that happens, I'm going to challenge you to look at the people working there. I bet you they're not smiling. For the longest time when I was in restaurants and was a chief marketing officer for several restaurants, I thought I was brilliant. Man, I could look at certain things in there and I could see whether the food was up or whether there's silverware wrapped, and I could see these cues as to whether things were going right. And then one day somebody challenged me. I had a team member that I'd actually recruited out of one of the restaurants. I used to be the CMO for Red Robin, and I had recruited her. She was a server at Red Robin, and now she's on my marketing team. And so she's in the meeting with me, and we were talking about how hard it is to know if somebody's really satisfied. And she started to talk, and then she stopped. And I said, well, no, what were you going to say? Well, no, nothing. She was embarrassed. I said, no, tell me, what were you going to say? She said, well, I really don't think it's that hard. And I said, well, really? How would you know if they were satisfied? She said, well, I just like to see if they were smiling when they left, right? I would tell you the same thing about team members. If the team members are smiling, things are going pretty well. 90% of the time, I would say, at least, then the guests are probably smiling and having a good time. So that's kind of why we start with our team members. Because if they're not excited about what they're doing, then forget about the rest of it as well. And so that's part of that from a branding standpoint. The other piece, too, is this makes a lot of decisions easy for us. We have a lot of opportunities, as you can imagine, that come through our company and our department. This makes a lot. Okay, is it an emotional connection we're making? Well, then I probably don't want to do it. It's why we do stupid stuff like Talk Like a Pirate Day. Anybody come over for Talk Like a Pirate Day? So Talk Like a Pirate Day started 2 years ago with us. Believe it or not, it is an international holiday. We didn't make it up. It's an international holiday, but it was just kind of a silly holiday. And we decided, let's just have some fun with it. Something we could do that others couldn't. So if you talk like a pirate, you can get a free donut. And then we said, you know what? What if somebody dresses up? Well, you know what? Let's give them a dozen. So the first year, it was really big. Last year, became one of the biggest sales day in Krispy Kreme for the year was Talk Like a Pirate Day. Over here at Stratford, I went over there, the lines were out the door, the cars were out into the street, and I literally walked in and there was a newborn, swear to you, a newborn dressed like a pirate, and then a 90-year-old dressed like a pirate right behind them, right? I mean, what a cool thing to kind of connect with people in that way emotionally. The other thing it allowed us to do was, when I got to Krispy Kreme, I canceled all paid media. We don't do any paid media whatsoever, zero. Everything we do is social and digital interactive because we were built on word of mouth, which social is now the new word of mouth. And so it fits us great. We do a lot of community marketing and then just a lot of non-traditional crazy stuff. I don't know, has anybody seen our Krispy Kreme cruiser? Has anybody seen the bus? Oh man, that breaks my heart. So a couple of years ago, we wanted to do something to get out, get away from the corporate office and get something out and let it drive through the country. So I found Ray Charles Orchestra's bus in mothballs in California. We shipped it to North Carolina, put it on a reality show, had it rebuilt, and it will do 37 states a year and about 500 stops, just driving around, delivering donuts, and going to events and having fun. It's those kind of crazy things that when you're living this world that you can kind of start doing because it, again, fits with the brand. The other thing that helps me is when I get management to understand this and they agree with it, then that doesn't seem like such a crazy thing. It fits within, if we were touching and enhancing lives and making emotional connections, then you would do those things. Again, back to where you're coming from. If you have an objective, that's going to make your decisions a lot easier, isn't it? If you know what it is you're trying to do. The other thing I would tell you is something for you to think about is there's going to be aspects of that you got to drill down a little bit deeper in. And I'm going to give you ours. These are our pillars. And they're pretty simple. And the other thing I'll tell you is you're gonna end this and go home and you're gonna go, that guy gets paid to do that. That's really pretty cool. But sometimes the best is the simplest. The most brilliant is the most simple idea that you could come up with, or simply coming up with something in a way that you hadn't thought of. Who's got, I would imagine you all have, maybe you have to put them down. You all got a phone, right? Mm-hmm. You've all got it with them, and you've probably got a smartphone with you, right? So think about for a second how complex that is, right? And so for us, and I'll go ahead and preempt one of the ones which is simple, is think about what goes into that. I mean, almost every piece of information in the world you could access right now, right? And even though you would complain that it's going to take about 3 seconds and that little thing's going to spin for 3 seconds, if you think about where that signal had to go up into space and then go find that information for you and then bring it back to you, and we're whining about 3 seconds, right? But think about how complex that is, but then think about how easy that is to use. That thing is so successful because it's allowed people like me to be able to use it who have no idea how it actually works. Again, That then became an incredible idea because it simplified something that would be complex. On the craveable side, obviously the donuts are craveable, but in addition to that, we want the experience to be craveable. We want, I mean, do you know those people? Who in your life is that craveable person that, you know what, I just like being around that person. Anytime I have a chance to hang out with that person, I want to, because I just kind of crave that experience. We want to be that with our guests. So it's not just about the donuts. They just like being there. They like coming by. Think about that for you as an individual. So if you were going in and you're interviewing for a job, or better yet, trying to keep a job, do you want to be the person that everybody wants to be around and craves? Not just because you're a nice guy and they like you, but because, you know what, you're interesting, and that you bring something to the table, and that you really, when they leave a meeting with you, they're smarter. I mean, wouldn't that be the place that you want to be? So think about that from a craveability of, why would somebody want to crave me? We talked about the simple one here, so I'll slip past that one. You might say this is different words for you. For us, we talk about being genuine. You might say it's real, or it's authentic, or, you know, you come up with your own word there. But for us, it really is about being who you are and not having, I'm not going to pick on anybody's particular business, but you all know those businesses you walk in and they say hello to you automatically, right? Most of the time not even looking at you. Not really that sincere, is it? It becomes just something they have to do. We don't want to be that. And so we don't want to then have our team members as machines who have to do the same thing all the time. We want them to be able to be real and genuine. The other thing, interestingly enough, that we see out of our research, you know the big window that we have in our shop? What originally that was just so people can see the machine and it would be interesting. What we hear back from guests now is that they like the transparency of that and what it says for us as a company. I can see all your ingredients, I can see all your people, I can see what you're doing, you're not hiding anything, you're not trying to do something, you know, some places I go in and eat, I just kind of wonder what's going on in the kitchen, and then I don't want to think about what might be going on in the kitchen. But in your place, I can see all that, and it's transparent. Again, translate that to you. Is that an important thing for you as an individual? Being a transparent and genuine and real person, how important is that for you? Or do you want to be that person that you never quite know what they're thinking, right? Obviously, we're fun, and sometimes we forget that. We get so caught up in the business that every once in a while we have to say, okay guys, come on, this is Krispy Kreme here. We're putting paper hats on ourselves. Let's not try to take ourselves too seriously. This one's really sad, actually, that being good-hearted or just being nice is somehow a differentiator in today's society. How sad is that? You think about, for a second, think about something, pick the place you like to go to eat, right? And I would ask you about it, or let's bet you're going to buy something. You bought a set of tires, let's say. And I said, well, how was that? Oh, God, it was great. Well, why was it great? Well, you know what? I ordered them, and they got in on the day they said they were going to get in, and I had an appointment, and as soon as I got there, they got me in, and they put them on, and when I got the thing back, my car wasn't dirty, and they said it would take 45 minutes, and it took 45 minutes, and they charged me exactly what they said they were going to charge me. Man, it was a great experience. It's like, well, wait a minute. Wouldn't you expect all that? It's just what they're supposed to do. But somehow in today's society, just doing what you're supposed to do somehow and being nice about it somehow stands out. Now, the plus side for you is, think about for a second, if you're just nice, you can stand out. Well, how hard is that hurdle, right? Just be pleasant, just be nice. Just have some integrity and do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it, and you'll stand out. The great news is that the hurdle is incredibly low right now for people's performance. And candidly, I'm going to pick on you now, the hurdle for people at your age is even lower. The expectation of people your age right now is kind of an all-time low of attitude and what they're going to put into it. I don't mean to pick on you. The great news is then, all you got to do is that. Just stand out just a little bit and be nice, right? And then you're going to stand out over and above the crowd. The last thing for us is about shareable. Obviously, I know some of you in here probably have tried to attempt to eat a whole dozen by yourself, and maybe you can pull that off. Most people don't, so it's usually a shareable kind of experience. So that's part of what we want to do too, that we want to try to make sure that anything that we do is very shareable. So I'm going to wrap this up, and now we're going to talk about you guys for a second. And but I'm going to give you a couple of challenges first, and then from a timing standpoint, we're probably really good, right? Yes. Okay. So then we can just talk, and you can ask me questions. How on earth am I going to get a job? How do I stand out? So here's a couple of challenges I have for you. The first one is figuring out what your joy is. And I don't mean about just what gives you joy, but if ours is joy, if that's the essence of what we're about, what are you about? What's the essence about what you're about? You got to find it. I had a conversation the other day with a graduate student, that's about to, he is about to graduate with a master's degree from a very prominent university. And I was helping this individual as he was thinking about what he wants to do and getting a job, and gave me his resume. And so I asked him, I said, well, tell me about yourself and what you want to accomplish. And this individual talked for about 5 minutes, maybe less than that. And it was like, well, I just want to get a job where, you know, I'm really flexible. And I mean, he just kind of, he didn't say anything. I mean, he really came up with nothing. But I'm going to challenge you. What would you say? Right? What would you say right now is your objective or your purpose? Because you better have it, because someone's going to ask you the question. And you're so potentially afraid of giving the wrong answer that you end up giving no answer. And you end up meaning nothing to anybody. And this individual, he appreciated it afterwards, because I did apologize then a week later, because I was afraid that I scared him. He happened to be wearing a blue sweater when I talked to him. And I said he'd gone for an interview. And he got through the first interview, didn't make it through the second interview. And he said, well, you know, I'm really not sure why. And I said, you want to know why? I'll give you an idea. Because you're now known as the guy in the blue sweater. There's nothing else that they remember about you whatsoever. There's nothing on your resume. There's nothing you probably said to them that was memorable. They just remember, yeah, there was a guy in a blue sweater. Don't be the guy in the blue sweater. You know, be somebody who stands out and is memorable. So a couple of challenges for you. And the differentiation is going to be a key to that one. You got to figure out, how am I different? How do I stand out from all these other people? And if you were to go online now and say, you know, type in Google different, you know, Google different image, what you're going to see is, you're going to see like an image of a whole bunch of white eggs and a red egg in the middle of it. Honestly, it's not that simple. There's a lot of people out there looking for jobs with a lot of talent. So it's not like everyone's just plain and you've got to stand out from being plain. There's a lot of people with a lot of talent. There's a lot of people who've been working for 5 years or 10 years that are now looking for jobs and are willing to potentially even lower their standard of living now to get to start over again. And that's the competition. So if you think, this is probably a little bit more realistic as to what you're going to go up against. A lot of different very interesting things that people are going to look at and they're going to see, and they're going to try to contemplate whether you have an advantage. But you've got to figure out then what your advantage is, and you've got to hold on to that. And it's got to have somehow some differentiation. The other piece too, as I'll tell you, you know, there's a lot of theories about writing your resume. We can talk about that a little bit too. Every time it seems like I see a resume and somebody puts, like, a lot of times people will put an objective on the top of the resume, and usually there's something about, well, to find a position in such and such industry where my skills, right? You know, you've heard that one, right? You've seen it. 9 times out of 10, nothing in that objective has anything to do with the company with which you're going to interview. Turn that around, because honestly, they don't care that much about you. It's about them. What are you going to do for them? So turn that thing around in the objective. Make the objective about somebody else. Make the interview about somebody else, about that company and what you hope to be able to do and learn from that company and that interaction, as opposed to, I've got a degree, so you should hire me because I really want a job, right? So a couple things here. First of all, find your mission. What is that? What is your purpose? What are you about? What do you care about? What do you want to accomplish in life? It's not too early to do that. I know many of you, and I'm going to play this out because, honestly, I have kids your age, so I know how this works. And believe it or not, I was also your age at one point in my life, right? So you go through life with this. You're in middle school, and you're like, you know what? If I could just get away from these middle school kids and get in high school, everything would be fine. And then you get in high school, and you go, you know what? If I could just get my car, everything would be fine. If I could just have some wheels and I could drive, if I could just have a car. And then you get the car, and you're like, you know what, if I can just get out of high school, oh my gosh, if I could just get out of high school and get in college, everything would be fine. And then you get in college, and you're going, oh crap, if I could just not be a freshman, right? If I could just not be a freshman, I would be fine. And if I had a little money in my pocket, boy, that would help. And then you get close to a senior, like, you know what, if I can just get out of college and get a job, then everything's going to be fine. You're going to play that game the rest of your life if you don't stop playing that game. I'm just telling you now, you got to stop playing that game. You've got to be thinking about that and thinking about it all the time. So part of then knowing your mission and what you want to accomplish, and you know what? Again, so average age in the room, what? You're 19, 20, right? Maybe 21?
23.
Come on. So let's say you set out on this mission and you take that first job. I also counseled this girl one time about a job. She actually was graduating and already had a job potential in Washington, D.C., and it was a pretty good job. And she was in front of me going, I just don't know if that's what I want to do. And I said, seriously? I said, so let's say you go and you do that for a year, and then you're going to be, what, 22? I mean, come on. Then you change. If it's not what you want to do, you're 22 at that point. But you know what? What have you got behind you? You got a year worth of experience behind you. And if you know what your mission is, you know what you're trying to learn during that time as well, right? You're not just going through the motions of it. Which takes us to the last one of it, is, man, live it on purpose. Live your life purposefully. So think about the things you're doing now. Every class that you enroll for should have a reason. The people that you talk to, the mentors you try to get, the conversations you have with your professors, people you try to talk to out in the world, you know, people that your parents know even, have a purpose for having a conversation with them. And not like you're using them, they'll be glad to help you probably, but have a reason behind the stuff that you're doing. Have a reason behind the decisions that you're making, because ultimately they should be getting you closer to this, right? Because I guarantee you that everything you're doing, the decisions you're making, are leading you somewhere. And they're going to be leading you towards something, or they're going to be leading you away something. And if you don't even know where you're trying to go, good chance are it's going to be leading you the wrong way, right? And so have some purpose about the decisions that you're making and what you're doing, and what you're wearing, and how you're holding yourself, and how you address people, and all those things really matter. And it's hard to believe them now, but they really do. When you're doing your schoolwork, well, we all need good grades, right? Think about what you're learning. Think about what's the context of what this is, and what am I really learning about it, and then how am I going to be able to use it? I know most of it seems useless to you, right? It's like, I'm never going to use that. You are, and the thing you're going to use the most is using your brain to figure it out. Sometimes the assignment isn't as important as what you're thinking about and how your brain is working, allowing you to solve problems and think through things and understand those things and opening and using the muscle that's in your brain. Think about it that. Even if you don't understand the assignment and how it could possibly benefit you, know that using your brain will benefit you every time, right? So here's the deal. If you're doing that and you're really missing yourself for some level of purpose, the conversation that we're going to have is then, what are you going to do about it, right? Because at some point now, you got decisions to make coming out of the room. So I'm going to challenge you now. You will leave here and you're going to make a decision to either do something or you're going to make a decision not to. But you're going to make a decision one way or the other, right? And so my challenge to you is this. Figure out what that is. Think about your resume for a second. I'll go and jump to that right quick. Think about your resume, and I know every one of you probably have. Do you all have a resume? I hope. If you don't have a resume, you should write one. Even if you're not looking for a job, by the way, you should write one. You all have a resume, and I bet it looks something like this. Your name and address and stuff is at the top, maybe in the right-hand corner, maybe centered. Who knows? You may have a funny little squiggly line, you know, or something down the side. You've got an objective across the top, potentially. I'm trying to get a job. And then the first thing it is, you're going to have probably your work experience. And you're going to have a chronology of, I worked here, I worked here, I worked here, I worked here. And then it's like, okay, where'd you go to school? So you're going to have your education. And then you're going to have other activities, and you're going to have those down there. And then anything else you should know. And it's probably going to look something like that. For many of you who don't have a lot of work experience, that's not going to look very good. Because that work's going to look pretty slim, right? So you got to figure out then, what do you have to offer? So as an example, I was talking to somebody not long ago about their resume. And this individual was on a sports team in college that he walked on and ended up being voted the captain of that team. Now, I started asking him questions about this, and I'm like, so why were you voted captain? Well, I think I was always there, and I was always the one kind of motivating. It seemed like I was kind of inspiring everybody, and it just, I kind of fell into it. And I had to like organize our fields on this sport, right? And I had to then, actually as part of the team, I had to help put the budget together for the university to help get funding for our team. And so he goes through this whole deal, and I'm like, okay, where's that on your resume? I'm looking for it, and it's at the bottom line under activities, and it said varsity rugby, right? All of a sudden, I'm mining through that, and I'm seeing leadership. I'm seeing that you're inspiring people. I'm seeing that you're causing them to act. I'm seeing that you're interacting on budget. I'm getting a lot more out of that, but it's the last line of your resume. So what your resume might end up looking like is something completely different. You might say, you know what, here's what I'm about. I'm about leadership. I'm about inspiring people to act and being accountable. Those now may are the headlines of your resume. Those might be those major headlines of the resume, and then you're going to describe underneath those about yourself. Again, that would probably stand out as opposed to the resume that I described earlier, right? So, but again, you got to figure those things out for yourself. You got to figure out what is. And if you can't find anything that differentiates you, well, you better go find something now. You better go do something, right? So that really is it. My message to you is that, and it's as simple as that. And frankly, it doesn't matter so much where you are now. It matters where you're going to take it. Because you know what? I would tell you honestly, you might get depressed and go, oh crap, I'm way behind now. You got enough time between now and the day you die to do everything you're supposed to do between now and the day you die, right? So start clean. Start it now, right? And then you can do. Because, or you can waste another week, or you can waste another month, or you can waste another semester, right? Or you can do it now. And so that would be my encouragement to you. And so with that, that's kind of the Krispy Kreme Dwayne spiel. So open to questions, Krispy Kreme, work, school, me, whatever. I'm open book. Come on. I'll pick on you if you're not going to call. If you're not going to say something, I'll pick on you. I'll call people out. Yes, sir.
I was going to ask, what key element have you discovered about yourself from working with Krispy Kreme?
I discover how stupid I am every day. How about that? You know, somebody was asking me the other day about continuing education and how far do you go. You know what? If you're not studying for your next master's every day at work, then you're missing something, right? And I think the other thing I've continued to learn is that that I should walk in every room and assume that I'm the stupidest person in the room. And if I walk in and think that, then I'm going to be looking for those wonderful nuggets of things I can learn from everybody else in the room, as opposed to thinking how smart I am and what I'm going to say next. And so when I get to Krispy Kreme, there is a longevity and sense of just wisdom and patience in that company that I so admire. And I learned then that it's not about me. I had that question the other day too from an interview that said, they talked about all the great things that have happened in the 3 years since I've been there. And I said, you know what, wait a minute. The company existed for 73 years before I walked in the door, and I'm sure they'll do fine whenever it is I retire. So, come on. Yes, sir.
In the beginning of your presentation, you talked about emotion a lot. And my question is, in the Krispy Kreme workplace, having a high level of emotional intelligence, is that like required in the Krispy Kreme workplace, or that's just like, you know?
I'll put it this way, it's beneficial. It's probably not required of any of us. If we all looked at our emotional intelligence, it's probably lower than we would hope it would be, candidly, because we all behave poorly. And I would say that anywhere you go, though, now, not just in Krispy Kreme, having a level of emotional intelligence, even if it's, I'm going to just take an example. Let's say for a second you're working for GE. I've never worked for GE, but I'm assuming GE is probably not a terribly emotionally driven company. Okay? I'm just making that assumption. But the emotional intelligence will help you understand when somebody sends you an email that seems like it's slamming you, not to just shoot an email back, right? Your emotional intelligence would say, you know what? I'm going to step back for a second. I'm going to think about that. And then I'm probably just going to go talk to them, as opposed to just assume. So I'm going to assume innocence for a second. So really, at any place that you're in, and even where you guys are, that probably happens to you as well. How many times have you gotten a text from somebody, a friend or something, that really made you mad? Until you went and talked to them and realized that they didn't mean it the way it sounded. They were just texting you in a couple of words. That can benefit you anywhere. I would tell you, though, on the Krispy Kreme side, we probably even get too emotional, right? I mean, it just, sometimes that overwhelms us and the emotion that we have for the brand and what it does for people. But I'd probably rather err on that side. Yes, ma'am.
What makes you guys different than Dunkin' Donuts?
Well, I think. Okay. One of our attributes is humility. So I'm not going to take a slam at somebody else. So first of all, I would say Dunkin' Donuts has their plan, and they are clearly becoming more and more successful in what their plan is. I think what makes us different is that we're willing to be different. And what you see a lot of times, and this isn't just in our business, you'll see this, and I would challenge you to try to think across industries. Everybody eventually ends up being more and more the same. If you just think about I don't know, laundry detergent, right? Well, can you think about one laundry detergent that somehow is greater than the other? They all end up then saying, well, then you came up with this little pod, and now I have a pod, and then you have softener, now I have softener. And they all end up kind of going like this, to where there's really no difference at all, right? And so I think one of the things that we try to do in Krispy Kreme is try to figure out these things that makes us different, and then we turn and we go as far and fast that way as we can. Rather than saying, well, everybody else in the business kind of has a sandwich, so maybe we should have a sandwich, right? And I'm sure it sells well for them, but not long ago I got a thing in the mail from that company that was marketing a tuna fish croissant sandwich. And I thought, well, that's kind of odd. Also, there's a National Donut Day. If you don't celebrate National Donut Day, you really should. So National Donut Day. On National Donut Day, we were in New York City giving away donuts and doing a whole bunch of stuff. And on their website, they were promoting breakfast burritos. So I think for us, what makes us different is kind of knowing this and doing the emotional side and going that way. Yes, sir.
With that being said, do you feel your biggest competitor is yourself, making yourself better, or competing with all those companies selling donuts as well?
Oh, definitely. Our biggest competitor is finding ways to share with people more occasions where they can have donuts. It's probably our biggest competitor. Sometimes our biggest competitor might be guilt, where people think, "Oh my gosh, I can't eat another donut, right?" But ultimately, we try to communicate to them. By the way, they'll make you feel better about your donuts today. An original glazed donut is only 190 calories. I bet every one of you had more than. If anybody had breakfast this morning, I bet you ate more than 190 calories. Even if you had a muffin or a bagel or even a Snickers bar, right? So we try to look at the barriers and turn them and get them away. But the one thing we found too is overwhelmingly, people want to eat more donuts. They just need an excuse. And so even rather than inventing excuses, that takes too much work, honestly. Trying to get somebody to do something they don't want to do takes way too much work. I'll watch social media and see how people are already using us, and then I'll just help them do that. The Hotlight app. Does anybody have a Hotlight app on their phone? Please tell me.
No, it went off too many times.
Oh, you're killing me. You're killing me. So our Hotlight app, download our app, and within 2 seconds of the Hotlight coming on, it'll tell you that the Hotlight's on, right? We all need that, don't we?
No, too much temptation right there.
So, but kind of back to that, making it simple, is we could have done it, right? We could have done a game, we could have done all kinds of stuff, or things that made you download this and do this or do this. What we found is the way people want to use this is they want to see when the Hotlight's on. So let's just make that easier for people, and so we did that. I think we have 500,000 downloads now on the Hotlight app. It is crazy for sure. I'm sorry, another sidebar. Like our Facebook page now, we've got nearly 5 million Facebook fans. And I know you think we're huge, but we only have 750 units, or maybe close to 800 now. In the whole world, we only have 250 in the United States. And so those numbers are kind of overwhelming, really, for that kind of brand. Sorry, that was way beyond your question. Yes, ma'am?
How do you promote healthy eating or healthy habits in your company?
We get the question a lot, obviously, and we're selling snacks. And so really the way we typically address that is probably threefold. One is reminding people that a donut is 190 calories, so you could do far worse. There's a lot of things out there that surprises people. Matter of fact, a couple of years ago, we were on the eat this, not that side on Men's Health. They were comparing it to different other snacks that you might have in the middle of the day. And so we kind of remind people of what the real numbers are. But beyond that, we also talk about the fact that the average guest comes in about once a month. So having a donut once a month is probably kind of the balance of anybody's life. The final thing we talk about too is, we really do believe there's something to be said for emotional health. And what typically people use us for is that. It's a comfort food. It is, man, I've had a long week and I just need a donut. And so for us, that we talk about those as kind of the pillars of that. The other things that the other piece, I guess, to that is if you were to go over to our Ivy plant and tour that Ivy plant, I have PhDs over there, I've got nutritionists over there. Every bag of mix that's produced, they pull QA samples out of that and put it under the microscope and test everything. And there's really only a few basic agreements in that mix. And we got people running over trying to find just the exact best wheat. And so we really spend a lot of time, hey, if you're going to have a snack, let's just make sure that what we're putting into that snack is as good as it can be. Yes, sir.
Well, I'm curious about the positioning. I mean, you talked about mission. I might say it's more positioning. How did that come about? Is that because of new management? Is that because of you? Or there's a substantial change now in really understanding not only the business, but why people do what they do. How did that come about?
Well, I'm very blessed in that the mission came before me, so I got to inherit it, which was awesome. It was driven by our CEO, who honestly is one of the finest men I've ever known in my life. So Jim Morgan is our CEO. And for those who've been around a lot, we had a tough past about 10 years ago. You know, things went crazy. Stock went up to 50, and then all of a sudden the thing just cratered down to $1. And there was talks back in that day that may not make it. The company may go under. And ultimately, in the end, when you get to quality people like Jim turned it around. I mean, and I think he did so not because of, even though he is incredibly smart, it was because of integrity. It was because he understood, even though he was a finance guy, he understood how to get to the essence of something and what was really important and to drive that. He as an individual, as an example, knows the name and the family members' names of everybody at those 3 offices I told you, all those hundreds of people, and he goes by and visits every one of them every week. Every Friday, he goes by and says hello to every one of them and will ask them about their family and remember things going on in their family and say, hey, how's your son? Is his broken arm healing up? Those things have significant meaning inside of a company, and the leadership, right? And that's really what leadership is about, is being in front of people who want to follow you no matter where you're going is incredible leadership. And so for him, he was able to get to this place through a lot of work. And so again, fortunately 3 years ago, I inherited that. What I did was I championed it and said, that's not just something that's our mission, we're going to make all of our decisions based upon that. And so from there, it became everything that we
I mean, that's a big change from selling donuts to knowing what you're selling.
Yeah, well, it is a huge deal, and it is, the nice thing too is we've been incredibly successful. I think we're in our 19th consecutive quarter of same-store sales increases, which is pretty amazing. Not that, you know, we gauge it on this, but I think 3 years ago our stock was around $3, and I think it's 25, 26 now. And so we've just seen a lot of financial success. We were in debt back in those days to the tune of, I don't know, well over $100 million probably, and we're basically debt-free now. I mean, so people have been able to see that change and that this works, that actually people respond to this. And I truly think going forward in society that people are going to require companies to have a soul, right? To have something more that they're about than just trying to make money from me. Even though there'll be plenty of companies who are about making money from somebody and they'll do fine. But ultimately in the end, we've chose to go a different path. Any other questions? Nothing? Oh, yes, sir.
How has working at Krispy Kreme impacted you as a man/father?
As a what?
As a man/father.
I'm going to put you on the spot. So I'm sorry. This is my son actually over here who goes to school here, and what's his name say?
Would have never known.
Where's all the free donuts then?
So I go to school here. If you guys don't know me, my name is Connor Chambers. And so before Krispy Kreme, I guess if I can say how it impacted him, I would have to go before and then after, right? So before Krispy Kreme, he did Sonic and Red Robin and Noodles and Company and Fuddruckers. And Fuddruckers was right before he came out here. And Fuddruckers, my dad, he would never tell you any of this, so that's why I'm going to. He did a really good job of working like 100-hour weeks every now and then, just because like he felt that it was his duty to help all the people in his company. He was put in a really difficult position, and so and he stayed consistently through that. But then once he got to Krispy Kreme, it was this like surrounding yourself with people who make you better. So like my dad's an amazing person, always has been, but then once he got to Krispy Kreme, it was, well, I'm doing well because I surround myself with people that are doing well. Krispy Kreme's an awesome company. A long time ago, he wanted to work with Christians, and then when he got to work at Krispy Kreme, he said that was finally fulfilled. And so that was really cool to see.
You just got a better Christmas present. I would tell you about anybody. I mean, think about it in yourself. When you're doing something that you're passionate about, and honestly, when you are in the midst of where you think you're really supposed to be, and I would honestly tell you that I can look back now and look at all my experiences across those, and I was 11 years on the marketing side of McDonald's. All of those things and all of those experiences, now I can look back and see have led me up to today. I can draw on everyone who didn't see it along the way, but I now can see that they all led me to where I am today to give me the skills that I need today. So, yes.
Being like after graduating from college and you're looking to seek employment, when do you look more so on something as a job that you're more passionate about, and when do you look for more of a job that you're just trying to pay the bills? Like, what stage of your life comes where you want to be passionate, and then you know that after graduating you're going to have to find a job? When does that fulfillment come into play?
I would tell you, even though this is going to sound a little bit like a canned answer, you need to figure out a way to be passionate about anything you're doing. And so even if it is a job now to pay the bills, this is not my career job, but you know what? If you were to act like it was, if you were to think this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, and I'm going to be that passionate about it, number one, you're going to be more successful there. Number two, the chances of you finding the next thing is going to go up. Because inevitably, you're probably going to be interacting with other people. They may be at that company and then go on to another company and remember you. Or you're going to be interacting with other businesses who are going to see that and they're going to go, holy cow, when we have an opening, I want her. Man, she is on it. I can remember one young lady in particular, when I was in Colorado, I interviewed this young lady. I'll never forget her, because this is from my wall of shame, by the way. I was making fun of her job and I should not have. She was interviewing with me and she was a marketing person for kind of this huge engineering firm. And I just thought, God, how boring does that sound, right? And so I kind of asked her that way, which was not good of me to do. I said, so, man, because I could tell she's really dynamic and excited. I was like, how do you stay this dynamic working as a marketing person for an engineering firm? And she looked me square in the face and she goes, are you kidding? We're making the world a better place to live. And she absolutely believed it. And when I started asking her about it, the company she worked for, what they engineer, they rebuilt the Panama Canal. There was a place in China that every year it floods and kills tens of thousands of people, and they went in and built a dam to save all those people's lives. I mean, that's what her company does. And so for her, she figured out what the essence then of what and how she could have purpose in that job. And she was still looking for other opportunities, but man, for what she was doing in that day, she was sold out. And those things matter. And so I guess I would tell you is, so no matter where you are and what you're doing, find it. Find that little essence. I'll give you another example from a Krispy Kreme standpoint. Before I took this job, I was visiting Krispy Kreme locations, and I went in a location in Greensboro. And I went in at 3 o'clock. And if you've ever been in any kind of restaurant at 3 o'clock, that's not the best hour to go in, right? Shifts are changed. Many of you probably have worked in places like that, right? The thing's dirty from the lunch. I mean, and I walked in this Krispy Kreme, there was a person in there, and I walked in the door, and she's behind the counter, and she looks up and she says, come on in here. She said, how are you doing today? And I said, I'm doing okay. And she goes, just okay. You step up here and let me make you great. Right? She is working at Krispy Kreme, and she is, what everybody else would see, she's selling donuts. That's not what she saw, right? She was making people's days great, right? That was her job. I'll give you another example quickly in Red Robin. So Red Robin, we opened up a ton of stores, and Red Robin was a great experience because Red Robin is actually driven by their core values: honor, integrity, seeking knowledge, having fun. They were really driven by that. And I was recruited there to drive the business based on its values. It's really what we were doing. And so we were at this opening, and I'm doing what I'm qualified to do, which is basically just walk around. And so I'm just kind of observing. And what were bussers, we call them sales support. And we call them sales support because, you know what, we can't have any more sales unless that table's clean, right? And so they kind of knew their gig and what they were doing. And I noticed this one young man, he was 16 years old, he was on fire. And he was running around, he was introducing himself to guests as the sales support guy. Hey, if there's anything else that anybody can get you, just please let us know. He's patting the other guys on the back and saying, hey, we need to do this. And he's 16. And so when everything was over and said and done that day, I went up to him at the end of the night and I said, hey, listen, I just want to talk to you for a second. You have a second? And so he sits down. He's kind of nervous because he didn't know who I was, but he knew I was like some executive in the company. And I said, I just need to tell you, you did a terrific job today. And I said, you see those guys sitting in the corner over there and that lady, your management team and the big managers? I said, you know what? All of them started off basically where you started off. And I just want to tell you, you could probably do anything you wanted in the company with that kind of attitude. And I just want to tell you I appreciate it, and I feel like I need to do something for you. And so I pulled 20 bucks out, and I gave the kid 20 bucks, and I said, you know what? You've been so nice, right? Go do something nice for yourself. And the guy looks at his feet, and he said, something was bothering him. And I said, are you okay? And he said, well, I don't mean to sound like I'm not appreciative, but we're kind of a team here. Would you mind if I shared this with the other guys? And so after I stopped crying. And so I go back over to the table where the management team was, because the thing's closed, right? And I said, guys, you are not going to believe what just happened. And I told them the story, and they just kind of stared at me. And I'm like, did you not hear what I just said? Can you believe it? And they reached over and they grabbed a stack, no lie, this high, of comment cards, and they set them in front of me, and they said, these are the comment cards that came today that named him by name as a busser, right? So again, what an example of, here's a kid, he's 16 years old, he has the lowest end position, if you will, of the entire place, and he made that impact in one evening. So back to the question is, don't ever think for a second that you can't make a major impact no matter what it is you're doing.
Good.
Other questions? How are we doing on time? Okay. Any other questions? How am I going to get a job? I mean, come on, anything else? Yes.
Okay, so as a follow-up for that, I know earlier in your presentation you said sometimes what's simple is what's best. How can a student who plans to graduate soon and wants to go out and get a job in the workforce be different, stand out in your employer's eyes as doing something different that will make them want to seek you, as you know you can benefit like quality to their company, but still have that simplicity to you as well?
I would tell you a couple practical things. Right now, you should be working on, first of all, about a 30-second sales pitch for yourself. If you can't tell somebody why they should hire you in about 30 seconds, you got problems. So you need to go practice that. Then you're going to play out, maybe think about, I don't know, 5 to 7 things that are things about you that you think are beneficial. And even take from your schooling, understand some concepts. So let's say it's something you're interested in. So, I don't know, you're interested in organizational behavior. So come up with some really good insights about organizational behavior that you can kind of use to answer questions. Because the biggest thing you're going to fumble over is in an interview, you're all going to be nervous because you're going to get asked a question that you don't know the answer to, right? Well, if you have 7 answers that can just about answer any question, right? Don't sound like an idiot, right? Don't sound like you're evading it. But you can do that. You can say, when somebody says, well, but how do you think you can help this company? And say, well, listen, I would never presuppose to know, what you're going to need as a company. But you know what? I do believe that there's some really cool insights coming right now in organizational behavior that are going to really help the efficiencies of all companies. Because I know through medical, through what's going on with the government and taxation and stuff, we're going to have to continue to do more with less. And so the ability then to have a more efficient organizational structure is probably going to help that. And all of a sudden now, you've answered that question, right? In a way that sounds like, man, this person knows, they know their answers, they know what they're talking about. So I would say play and rehearse those things. Very simple. Don't think you need to talk a paragraph. It's a couple of sentences where you can just go right to it. The other thing I would tell you, the huge mistake that happens when you're interviewing is, I would tell you, first of all, if you've made more than 1 copy of your resume, you've made a mistake. Every time you apply for a job, your resume should be different. Every time. Don't print those resumes out and send them. Take that resume, find out who you're sending it to. If you can find out names of people, go Google them. I mean, come on, man. When I was your age, there was no such thing as a computer, right? You have a huge benefit. There is nobody in this world that you can't go find information about immediately. Go find out if they've done public speaking. What did they say? What did they talk about? What did they like? What's important to them? And take your cover letter maybe and your resume and turn it to that very specific job where all of a sudden you look like the perfect person for this specific position rather than you've written a generic resume that might work for everybody. So that would be another very practical one that I would suggest that you do.
We want to say thank you.
Oh, thanks.
Before everybody runs out, just a note to you. Many of the things that he's talking about here today are things that we try to help you with at the Professional Development Center. Shameless plug for the good one. The point is this: how to put that thing together to make your story come out. That's what we try to do. We don't just try to tell you this is the template, make a resume this way. We try to look at what you're actually saying about yourself. What is the story you want them to get about you? We want you to be able to tell that story, because when your resume goes out, that's the only thing they see of you. And you want that resume and that cover letter to say, I want to talk to you about getting together and see if we can make something happen for the future. Second thing, we want to make sure that you understand that we are in the business of trying to help you to get yourself prepared for internships and so forth. And so a lot of the things he's talking about, that's what we are about. 008 downstairs. What's that room number?
008.
Come and bug me. Come and bug me. Some of you have come and bugged me, and I guarantee you, and I think those of you who have been there will be able to say, yeah, it made a difference. We're trying to make that difference.
I'm going to throw in a plug, though. Just one last plug for doing exactly. First of all, if you have an intern, you better. Like, absolutely, you better. Secondly, use them. I would tell you, I had a really good academic background. I did pretty well in school. I sent out 150 of those personalized resumes. And you know how many interviews I got? 2. Out of 150 personalized resumes. The way I got my job and started my career was my professor in school helped me get in a back door to have a conversation with somebody at a company. So I guarantee you, you better be using the resources that you have here, and if you're not, you're going to be going on your own, and you're probably going to lose.
Last thing, if you didn't sign or just put your name on our list over here, please do before you leave. And thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it.